There it is. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode here at the Kickpod, the podcast dojo for inspirational dojo talk, or should I say martial arts talk. I am your host, TJ Williams, fourth degree black belt in the Chuck Norris system. Here to talk about my martial arts experience, discussing and analyzing martial arts based subjects, and highlighting martial arts of all styles, all around the world, past, present, and future. Okay, so now I am back home because the last episodes I did was in Las Vegas when I was attending a martial arts convention, which was definitely amazing, a lot of learning experience. So definitely for next
Yeah,
year, I'm definitely getting ready for that fifth degree. Yeah,
nice,
a year from now, I'll be having a black jacket and 5 stars. All right.
nice.
Yeah. All right. So of course, for this episode, of course, I have a guest that's not too far from me, about 2 hour drive. So I'm back home. All right. So he's come from Orland, New York. Of course, he's a 10th degree black belt in AKT combative jiu-jitsu. Of course, eight AKT stands for American karate tactics. I don't know if that's the same name or it changed, but nevertheless,
We can talk
he's
about that.
oh yeah, definitely. All right, so of course, Barry bro, I'm sorry, I got it's like different ways of pronounce your last name. So how
Yep,
would you say it? How would you say your last name?
Broughton is fine.
Broughton. So
Yep.
Barry Broughton, everybody. So he's come to my show to come talk about martial arts and his journey. So I'm gonna say hello to him. So how you doing there, Barry?
I'm doing great, TJ. Thank you so much for the invitation to talk with you today. It's great to be here.
Yeah, that's my guess my goal for my podcast to really reach out to martial artists out there. And so far it's been going pretty much as far as like I'm trying to get mostly other countries, but yeah, I got Canada so far. So
Good.
yeah. So I'm definitely looking for
Well,
other locations.
well, hopefully this will continue to grow and expand for you and open up more opportunities.
All right. Okay, so of course you've been doing martial arts for like pretty much longer than I have. So what would you say how long you've been doing martial arts?
Oh my gosh. I guess it probably just depends on how you count the years. I guess in traditional martial arts training, 42, 43 years. But I guess if you consider the wrestling and grappling that I started in third grade, I think third or fourth grade. That pushes me to probably 50 some years. So a lot of people, I think, oftentimes don't consider wrestling as a martial art, but certainly back with the Greco-Roman times, they certainly did. And so I wrestled through elementary school and junior high and high school. And because ground fighting and grappling is a big component of the system that we teach today, that's why I include that, because certainly wrestlers have a really strong sense of awareness of body spatial awareness and where they're at in space that is really important for throws and grappling and ground fighting. So that's why I kind of include that in there. So I've kind of got a diverse background thanks to the Army and Uncle Sam and allowing me to train with all kinds of different people all around the world.
Oh, amazing. All right, so we're gonna kind of get into your like current background later on within the show,
Sure.
but for right now we're gonna go in a time machine. So you're gonna take us back in time to like where this all began. Well, before this all began for you. So basically, the first question would be, how would you describe yourself before martial arts?
Oh my goodness. Well, I I guess I had the best description. I just did not have a lot of self-confidence. You hide it well, you cram it down in, not the best of childhood, um, you know, pretty meager background. But through martial arts, it gave me the confidence and still the confidence in me. And I guess the willingness to take risks that I didn't have prior to that. And once I started training in martial arts and began to realize I could do things that other people couldn't do, then it began to instill a sense of confidence and just the willingness to go out on the edge and take risks that other people that I knew weren't doing. And so it's really kind of helped me in that regard.
Yeah, it's like martial arts. Usually, like, you have to have something that like boosts up your self confidence, and definitely martial
Yeah.
arts is like that number one thing that that people will actually do to actually boost that confidence.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same way with me. It's like I didn't have that. Well, I pretty much I could say I had like that condition of ADHD, I had that
Mhm.
energy, but it was like I need to at least use it the correctly. I mean, I wanted to
Yeah.
have that energy, but it was like I didn't have no control. I mean, really,
Yeah. I
it's
think
like, well,
oftentimes you need an outlet, and you need some structure in that outlet that helps you to do that. Yeah.
yeah. Right. Okay, so what would you think like the first push? I know you mentioned that you did wrestling in the third grades, which is
Mhm.
yeah, that's kind of like almost a base of doing martial arts. So yeah,
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Well, on top of that, um, we're talking the 1970s, and it's 1960s actually, 1970s. Um, in the early 1970s, I think it's probably 1973 was when the television series Kung Fu came out. I don't know if this might be before your time. I don't know if you're familiar with that. David Carradine
yeah,
played a Shaolin monk. So that movie or television series came out. The movie Billy Jack had come out in both of those. And I know it's old school and a lot of people aren't even sure what I'm talking about here, but it intrigued me. It was like the duality that these guys were dealing with. They had this inter turmoil that they had going on, but they were kind of trying to hold it down and live a life of peace. But sometimes they're provoked that they actually have to use their martial arts technique to quell whatever the the situation was at the time. And I was really intrigued by that because I had my own inner battles that I was dealing with. And having been, like I said, wrestled, I thought, wow, this is just really cool that not only are they able to control a person, but doing these high flying kicks and spinning type stuff and things like that. I just loved that. And so it just kind of intrigued me. And so, back in those days, you look in the phone book and start making phone calls, and that just kind of pushed me to start seeking out who can I learn from.
nah, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much the start. Like you watch those. Like for me, my time, it was like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Cartoons, of course. Probably around my time be Jackie Chan and
Yeah.
yeah, all pretty much up to date. Um, Michael J. White, yeah, him.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, but
And all these guys, they probably didn't even realize it when they were doing it on the impact that they're going to have on other people's lives, not just for pure entertainment, but how it motivated guys like you and I and all these other people that have been doing martial arts their whole life. That, for us, it's not just a hobby, something that we do. A lot of us, it ends up being a lifetime pursuit, and it becomes a strong thing that um, defines your character. And so the neat thing is when you talk to some of these folks that were in the movies or in these television shows, they didn't even realize what it was that they were doing at the time. So it's pretty amazing how something like that can inspire a young kid to seek something out that's going to put their life on a totally different trajectory.
amazing, definitely. Okay,
Yeah.
so kind of getting back to the subject with wrestling. I know with wrestling, there's like people you watch, like not like Greco-Roman type wrestling, like Olympic type wrestling, but there's the other side of wrestling. So I call it like the sports entertainment wrestling.
Sure.
Yeah,
You do
so
that, don't you?
yeah, that's pretty
Yeah.
much what I do. So yeah,
Cool.
it's great that I incorporate martial arts in that, and then everything that I
Yeah.
do that is come naturally. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. So you kind of have a edge on a lot of the other guys. And I know there's schools around that actually teach, the, the entertainment wrestling. So good for you. That's awesome.
yeah. So yeah, it's
They're
like
amazing athletes, that's for sure. Some of these guys that are on the circuit that are out there fighting, almost every night, that are traveling around the country, they take a lot of abuse on a daily basis.
yeah, I mean, I'm approaching that plateau. I mean, I don't plan on going around the world, but definitely it's well, it hasn't totally taken a soul out of me, but it really, but mostly before I got into wrestling, it was like martial arts, and that's taken a lot of toll. So
Yeah.
yeah. All right. So of course, going into your pushing the martial arts, can you remember your first lesson, like the first class you ever took?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's back in the recesses there somewhere. Um, I started martial arts. It was actually had a push from a friend of mine that I was working with, and he started training, and he's telling me about it, and I was kind of blown away that he was training, because we were in high school at the time, and um, it was in a little small church that was this tiny little thing, and it was down in the basement, and the instructor was renting the basement out, and the basement was probably only like 15 foot wide by 20 long or something like that. And the ceilings were barely 7.5 feet tall. There was air ducts going down the center, light bulbs, bare light bulbs hanging out of the ceiling. So you had to be careful where you jumped or kicked so you didn't hit your head on something. And so I kind of walked down in this little stanky, dark little, well, it was a dojo at the time, even though it was a church upstairs. And we had to go outside in the grass to spar. So it was they, back then you just immediately get thrown right in, and the instructor knew I had wrestled. And so, hey, we're sparring tonight. You want to jump in on sparring? Yeah, sure. Man, I didn't know what the heck I was doing, clashing shins with kicks. And, it was an ugly, hot mess. I know that.
And definitely with sparring is like, of course, I guess years ago you didn't have to use like foam pads and all that stuff. Yeah,
we didn't have hand pads, feet pads, mouth guards, cups. We didn't have any of that. Shoot, I remember the first few tournaments back then. The June-Ree, remember the June-Ree sparring gear that first came out that was kind of a commercial stuff, and you get it through Century, I guess, way back when. And shoot, the first few tournaments, it was optional, and so we all thought, hey, if you're wearing that, man, you got that's for the wimps, and everybody had chipped teeth and all that type of stuff back in the day. It was you just didn't wear any of that type of stuff. But fortunately, we've learned through that. I think sometimes we think we have to be this tough, macho, bravado type stuff, but when you beat yourself up like that for decades, it just really shortens your career. And so fortunately, we're much smarter nowadays, and a lot of the equipment's mandatory. Sometimes it might be overused, but either way, it's I think we've made a lot of progress in the sport applications since that time.
Yeah, I know with of course with tournaments, they have like different type of sparring what was it say, divisions. Like you got, of course, like regulars like point sparring, continuous, and of course you have something the kumite, like full contact. Yeah.
Yep.
So definitely your time it was basically full contact,
Yeah.
you had to take like a bare fist to the face.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, those are fun days. It's kind of crazy that we did that stuff, but things evolve over time, and so that was good for the industry, I think, at the time, but we had things not changed, it wouldn't be as prolific as it is now, I don't think, because you just would have weeded out. People just didn't have very long training careers.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. What would you say your base style would be? Like if you what would you say your first black belt test that you ever did?
My first black belt was in a system that was it was an Americanized hard style of Kung Fu. It was called Wu Yan Jing, and it was basically Kung Fu style that was integrated with Ishinru and Taekwondo. And so it's kind of an eclectic type system back in the 1970s. And so that was kind of my base style. But there was no grappling, no throws or anything like that. It was purely a stand-up striking, kicking type style. But I immediately, because of my wrestling background, I immediately started incorporating grappling and wrestling techniques and throws and takedowns and things like that with my very first student 40 some years ago, who happens to still be training with me today. And so I immediately began incorporating that type of stuff. And so then over the years, like I said, being in the Army, I got to train with a lot of different people and a lot of different locations, and you learn a lot of different things, and it just infused things over the years. And so it's just kind of evolved into what it is that I teach today, and it is AKT Combative Jiu-Jitsu. So, I know a lot of systems, especially nowadays, they'll teach some stand-up striking stuff, and then they'll get a little bit of ground fighting, and then they'll try to incorporate some grappling, and they kind of do it all kind of segmented type stuff. And I know back in the day, even in your system, in the Chuck Norris system, there's some grappling stuff, right? But that's, I think, usually at black belt, if I remember correctly. and it usually wasn't at the color belts. But for us, it's all integrated right out of the gate. And what I noticed years ago is that there's a lot of folks that try to incorporate different systems or different styles, like stand up, integrating ground technique, or somebody's got a ground background, their ground fitting background, they try to incorporate some stand up striking techniques. But what happened, I think, a lot of times is they never really fully learn how to integrate them so that they look totally different when they're doing a different, fighting at a different range. And so I kind of jokingly say they kind of look like they're schizophrenic. When they're infighting, then they look like a certain style. They're fighting long distance, they look like another style. They're doing throws to look like another style, and then the ground look like another style. And so they're always kind of changing and never really realizing they can integrate all that stuff. And just because you're on the ground does not mean that you can't strike. And just because you're standing up does not mean that you can't grapple. And so if you learn how to integrate all that stuff, so that's right from day one of your training, then you're learning all that, how to transition from one range and one plane right out of the gate, that it just becomes seamless and flows much more effectively and efficiently, I think. At
Yeah,
least for me and my students.
yeah. The kind of what you're kind of saying is kind of going back to history, like with the the of the creation of Taekwondo and Tang Soo Do. Like, of course, when
Mhm.
Japan took over Korea, and of course they were forbidden to do the style that they were studying, and then you got that one guy that kind of escaped all that and went to another country, and of course, yeah, he went to China
Yeah.
to learn some other martial arts styles, and then of course
Uh-huh.
he comes back, and then of course there you go, Taekwondo, Tang Soo Do, yeah. So I kind of
Yeah.
relate what you're saying about like integrating like other styles and like the style that you were taught in, and yeah,
Yeah.
just to make that look better.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I think a lot of times, I mean, I'm sure you've seen it through your training, because you're a fourth degree now.
yeah,
Yeah. And so, how many folks have you seen that they've trained in another system, and then they come train with you? And so if you're doing something that has a strong Korean background, and then you got somebody who's got a strong Japanese background, they're trying to do a Korean system, well, you move differently, right? And so it feels weird to them that, or somebody who's purely done pure stand-up striking, and all of a sudden you're teaching them, to roll around and grapple on the ground. I had a student of mine years ago. He said, and he'd been training in other systems, and I'm teaching him how to do break falls, and then teach him how to do some throws and takedowns, and then how to transition to the ground from there. And he says, "Oh, wait a second. I've been learning all my life to stand up and walk, and now you're trying to teach me to play on the ground." Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, just like when you were a kid, So we just try to make it so it's not so cumbersome for somebody to be strong in one area and then try to integrate another range or plane of fighting or defense. So our system is primarily what we consider a reality-based personal protection, self-defense system. We do sport, we do compete in sport jujitsu, but that's secondary to the reality stuff of what we do.
yeah. I can relate. Like, well, with our style, we kind of call it ground combatives and stand-up combatives, and yeah,
Sure.
that's. I mean, we well in terminology, with ground combatives, that's pretty much Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and yet
Mhm.
with stand-up combative, that's like Krav Maga. So
Mhm.
yeah, so
Yep.
I can really pretty much relate what you're actually saying. Like, really, I mean, it's good.
Yeah.
It's good that you know how to defend yourself standing up, but you have to be well knowledgeable when you're fighting on the ground, because you never know. You might be on the ground, and if you don't know what you're doing, then you're in trouble.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to fight on the ground if I have to. I love it because that was what I did first, is wrestling, and I love going to the ground, but that's not the place I want to be in a street fight you know, for any reason. And heck, we live in, Western New York, where it gets snowy and icy, and you don't know what's going to happen. You might slip on the ice, step off a curb, who knows what, and you could end up on the ground and have two people on top of you. You don't want to stay there. You want to be out of there. So, but you better be able to fight your way out, right?
Yeah, I would say like probably if you had like a new student, it's like you kind of have to start them on the ground. It's like, yeah, you start. This is where you're going to end up being most of the time. So I'd rather have you learn how to defend yourself on the ground before I have you defend yourself standing up.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we do both. And then it's how do you get up properly? I mean, too many times people are vulnerable. They're vulnerable just trying to change planes, trying to get up from the ground, and then leave themselves vulnerable. We tell our students all the time, just because bad guys are knuckleheads doesn't mean they don't have friends that are going to jump in and take you just because you happen to take somebody else out. So, yeah.
Yeah, we always got to teach them like how to get up properly. I mean, you don't just, you don't get straight up. You don't just stand straight up when
Right.
somebody's over on top of you. I mean, they'll put you back down.
That's
Um,
right. Yes. Yes.
uh, so kind of going into like the creation. Well, of course, you have knowledgeable in anatomy, so that's pretty
Mhm.
much like pretty much double the indemnity in martial arts. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate enough that after being out of high school for a few years, um, so you go different ways, and so long story short, I ended up joining the Army to get an education. And I went in as a combat medic. Um, and fortunately, Uncle Sam kept on paying me to go to school, and I ended up becoming a battalion medical officer and got out after 9 years and continued my education and did some specialty training, surgery training in orthopedic surgery and sports medicine, and did that for years. I was always active in martial arts and teaching through all that time. And just as I learned anatomy, I began thinking, well, shoot, if I apply what I'm learning in medicine, maybe this will help me with the techniques that I'm doing. And I talk about this in my recent book, Comprehensive Anatomy for Martial Arts. Is I remember it like it was yesterday, even though it was several decades ago, during a cadaver lab, where you're learning anatomy and physiology, you have to dissect cadavers, as gross and barbaric as that might sound to some people, but you got to have real hands-on, experience, right? You can't just learn it from the pages of a book without having some real life application to it when people's lives are at stake. And so as I'm dissecting this shoulder, I'm thinking, jeepers, this is not quite what I imagined a shoulder looks like on the inside. You see it on pictures, but it just didn't seem quite what I was envisioning. And so I'm kind of turning the humerus, the arm bone, and have my finger down in there, kind of playing with the head of the humerus. And boom, I dislocated the shoulder joint. And I thought, wow, so that's kind of how a bent arm bar works.
Oh.
And so, but on a cadaver, it's not real fresh tissue and it's soaked with formaldehyde. And so it's not really, doesn't give you a real full appreciation of the anatomy. But as I was doing my orthopedic surgery training, my first time I did a surgical procedure where the shoulder is wide open on a living, live human being, moving the shoulder through the full range of motion with it exposed. I thought, wow, if I just tweak my arm bar a little bit, it's going to be much more effective than what I'm doing now, the way it's been taught to me. And sure enough, it worked. And I was sold. I thought, wow, so I've got to try to figure out, how do I apply all this intimate understanding of human anatomy into my martial arts training? And so it helped me with getting my kicks higher, knowing which way your foot's supposed to point for your post foot, and where's your knee, how do you do your pelvic tilt, all those things that you learn in kicking styles, but just to a greater degree of nuances. And so I just began incorporating that stuff with my students, and I began using the terminology and the vernacular that you use in medicine, in orthopedics, in sports medicine, with my students. When I'd be teaching something, that's the vernacular that I would use, so that you're more precise on the verbiage that you're using. So rather than saying, okay, turn your hand over, and a student's like, what do you mean by turning your hand over? But if I say, okay, supinate, they know that it means palm up. If I say pronate, they know that it means palm down. If I say, okay, put your arm distal to that, they know what I'm talking about. And so it's much more efficient, much more effective, and it takes the guesswork out of what it is that we're doing in anatomy. And it makes it so we all understand better what it is that we're trying to teach and get across. And so because we just use it as everyday verbiage, it's like our students talk about that all the time, And so when I teach seminars around the country, I kind of sprinkle a lot of that stuff in, just so that students or participants in seminars are getting exposure to different ways of presenting things and teaching and learning. And I just think it makes, for me as a martial arts instructor, it just makes it more fun So like almost every martial arts class for the past 4 decades has kind of been an anatomy class as well. And students, I think, like learning that as well. It's kind of been funny because, some of our students who've gone off to college after they've trained for whatever, 10 years or whatever, they go to college and they're taking biology classes and they've already know a lot of the verbiage and vernacular that they're going to be using. So it's just kind of fun that way.
Yeah, I guess like as a martial arts, it's always best to at least know a little bit about anatomy and like how
Yeah.
things work with techniques. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of the impetus for the book, is that everybody wants to know anatomy. And I think they know the importance of it, but it's hard because a lot of times what people do is they look at a wall chart, like of the muscular system or of the skeletal system, and they'll kind of memorize where the bones are at, but they never really learn the physiology or the kinesiology of how those work together and what it takes to move the human frame. Otherwise, if you're just memorizing a wall chart, it's just you kind of know where the anatomy is. So what my idea was with this book was to make it more comprehensive, to describe the anatomical structures, how it is it works with other systems, and then to sprinkle throughout what are the martial arts relevance for that anatomical structure or structures, and the clinical significance of it. How is it that something's injured or damaged, or how do you prevent injury to that? And so it was kind of an ambitious project, but because I travel around the country teaching seminars, oftentimes I'm teaching seminars with other people that are doing seminars as well. And they're great martial artists, they're great practitioners, but sometimes they're just not quite describing things as accurately as they should. And so I realized that we perceive things a little bit differently. As a classic example, oftentimes when you're talking to people about making a fist and they think about knuckles, oftentimes people are imagining this round marble-like thing in their fist that forms a knuckle. And it's really not, it's just the end of the bone of, as you probably know, of your metacarpal bone. You bend your finger down and it's exposing the cartilage on the end of your hand bone, not your finger bone. And so you're striking with your hand bone, not some round arbitrary knuckle, that people often perceive it to be. So I tried to make it so that it's informative and educational, but make it so that people can apply what it is they're getting to their everyday practice of martial arts.
Yeah, but with me, I kind of want to incorporate my fitness into martial arts, and
Sure.
just like tell them like for a thrusting front kick, it should feel like you're pushing, or a leg press. Like for kids, I
Mhm.
say you're like kicking a door open, but for adults, if you go to gym, that's leg press. So
Yeah.
you know what
Yeah.
muscles you're using. So basically, they want to use the right muscles for that thrusting front kick.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so with you teaching fitness, then I'm sure you do the same thing. You got to talk to the person from where they're at, what's their experience. And so if they know what a leg press is, that's how you do it,
Yeah.
but so that's just part of being a good instructor. So it sounds like you're hitting it out of the park with that, because
Yeah.
kids can think through, oh, I'm going to kick a door open. Yeah, that makes sense,
Yeah.
so yeah.
And also with kicking is there's accuracy. It's like if you're doing the thrust and kick right, the object that you're kicking should go straight. Like I
Right.
usually place like a focus pad on top, like another like a folk, not like a shield or something, or
Mhm.
and I have it sit there. It's like the object of a thrusting front kick, you need to kick it straight at the wall. And
Right.
if it goes up, then that means you're flicking the kick.
Yep.
Yeah.
You're arcing it rather than
Yeah.
having, yep. Yeah. That's a good way of doing that. Okay. I'm gonna have to steal that from you.
Yeah, accuracy. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
And no,
That's good.
also with anatomy, like pressure points or like knockout points. Usually I try to do like vernacular kind of like talk, saying like you hit somebody for the back of the head. That's like the external occipital protuberance. Yeah,
Mhm.
I usually say that long
Yep.
word. The students are like,
Yep.
"What is that?" I say
Yeah.
it's the bump in the back of your head.
Yeah.
That's a knockout point.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
good. But when you say that repeatedly, and you just use it, it just becomes part of their vernacular as well,
yeah,
so yeah, that's just the way to do it. It's just like repetition. And so the way I try to remind people sometimes, because I'll say, well, keepers, that's hard learning it that way. Well, so was the English language when you first learned it when you were a toddler. It's the repetition that makes it easy for you. So.
Hey. Okay, so what was your like inspiration toward creating your own dojo? Like, yeah.
Um, I never set out to be a founder of my own system. I know a lot of people, it's like that's what they're plan on doing, and so they're studying different systems and different styles with the intent of doing that. That was never my objective. I was very faithful and loyal to the system that I was in. It's just that I had, because of my opportunities to travel around and teach and learn from so many people, because I traveled around the world and was able to learn a lot of different things, that I was just always incorporating that into my teaching curriculum, no matter what it was that I was teaching. And because of the system that I was in order to get fifth degree, you had to, when you were tested, you had to incorporate new techniques and new concepts and new portions of the curriculum. And so initially, what I was teaching, that's where that AKT, American Karate Tactics, that you mentioned earlier, that's where that came in. It was initially a branch of another system. But as we grew and as we became much more diverse than the system in which it was founded, we were looking dramatically different than the system that we came out of. And so it just got, so it was kind of tough trying to ride the fence back and forth on where we're at. And so it just kind of came to, the leadership came to the conclusion at the time that it was time for me to take what I'm teaching and my students, my schools, and go do my own thing and let them do their thing. And so that's kind of the way that it evolved. So it wasn't like I was inspired to do it or wanted to do it. It's just that was the best thing for me to do, because I was oftentimes saying, well, this is how we do it. This is how it's done. This is how I do it. Now you make it so that it works for you. And so I kept on saying things like that. And after a while, I was just like, okay, this is getting old. And so we just determined that the best thing is to part amicably and just kind of do our own thing at that point. And so it's kind of been, and it set us on a different course, a different trajectory, so we've been able to do what, cut out the stuff that isn't effective for what it's for, 2022, whatever it is this year, so if it doesn't work anymore, we're not going to do it. And we'll continue to grow and continue to evolve. And as new things evolve, and hopefully 15, 20, 30 years from now, it doesn't look like it does today, because I suspect that we'll be fighting differently, using different weapons, different legalities. The way that we martial artists fight today is not the same as it was in 1980. Right? It's just because everybody nowadays thinks that they're an MMA fighter. Everybody today thinks that they're some UFC champion, and they've never been punched in the face, but for some reason they think that, they're going to do some crazy takedown and rear naked choke on you. And so self-defense of today is different than it was 20 or 30 years ago. Back in the old days, at least there was some sort of code amongst, thugs, it's like, but now it's just so different. So I'm hoping that AKT Combative Jiu-Jitsu will look different 50 years from now when I'm dead and gone. And all of our black belts know that. Our Combatives Council knows that. Our board of directors knows it. And so hopefully we continue to remain relevant for the era in which it's being used.
Yeah, I can highly agree what you're saying. Like, what things that happened years ago, it changed from what today, mostly because of technology. Like, everybody's like filming their fights and putting on YouTube, and people that don't even know martial arts, they learn from what they see from YouTube.
What they're watching.
Right. It's like, really, it's like they don't know how to do it properly, but yet they do it anyway, because they see that, they know how to beat somebody, or at least if they see you, and then they know how you fight. So
and they're willing to try things that they weren't willing to do before, because they've seen it before. Where a lot of times, back 50 years ago, they never saw anything like that, except that, had to go to a movie theater to watch, something like that, or 100 years ago, or whatever it might be. So we just kind of have to evolve, even from a self-defense perspective. Like you said, everybody's got a phone and a camera now. So we have to the way that we teach self-defense has to be a little bit different, because now there's the liability, because we live in such a litigious society, uh, that what we would teach right out of the gate for somebody before to do, you better be cautious now, because somebody's going to be filming it, and it may be perceived totally differently than the way that you perceived it, and it's probably going to be shown in court.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing with our black belt tests. Like really, like when I took my first black belt test, like from when I first took it back in 2004, and then my last black belt test when I took it in 2019. Like I could say those two were different. Well, mostly because I was going for a different rank. I was going for my first
Sure.
degree in 2004 versus going for my fourth degree in 2019. And we're just constantly changing. Well, not saying changing, we're constantly evolving the black belt test. We want to, at least for those who are going for black belt, we want them to show them like how would a black belt defend themselves. So
Right. Yeah.
so in that case, like you should be tired, you should be sucking
Right.
wind, you should be sweating like a horse, and
Yeah.
yet and you should be like showing us, do you want to live? Like
Right.
that's yeah.
Yeah. For me, I think that your black belt test should probably be the most difficult thing that you've done in your life.
Oh yeah.
Push you to the edge where you just think you cannot go one more step, and to realize that you've probably got more in the tank than what you think you do. And it needs to me, it needs to be a pivotal moment in your training. It needs to be a pivotal moment in your career. I've seen too many black belts who think that they never truly earned their black belt because their test was kind of a coast, that they kind of cruised through and it really was not that much of a challenge. And then they've questioned it for decades. Did they really earn that black belt? And it kind of plays head games, I think, for some people who don't feel like that they were really pushed to their max on their test. And I think we do our students a disservice if they're not pushed to the max on their black belt test.
Yeah, it's like really, it's like, and then it's just like asking, I'm here to get my black belt, but the question would be, are you here to get a black belt, or are you here to show us that you can fight like a black belt? So
Right. Yeah.
that's the true question that you should ask the students, like the first time they step in the studio or in the
Yeah.
dojo. It's like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Don't show up for your black belt test as a brown belt or a red belt or whatever system it is that you're in. You need to be showing up at your black belt test as a black belt. You need to be thinking and moving and fighting like a black belt. Absolutely, I agree with you.
yeah, just thinking about like this past convention, I pretty much felt so geared up for like my next rank because I'm trying to take in everything. Like I should say a good martial art, or should I say a great martial artist would like be perfecting their own style, but I say a true martial artist would go beyond what they're doing now. So for
Mhm.
me, I want to go beyond of what I know, and at least like you say, for my art teacher says, the way you could be a good or a true artist, you gotta go beyond what you know. So that means you gotta
Yeah.
know your history. So
Right.
really, with martial arts, I mean, I'm trying to like really go do research and like how did things originate. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And learn from past the experiences of other people in the past. Otherwise, we kind of learn it at the expense of our own students. Oftentimes, again, in my book, I talk about that. I kind of try to give a case for, because it's a pretty thick book, and it's more like a textbook, I think, than it is what most people perceive as an anatomy book compared to other books on the market. And so I try to preface up front that this is about education. It's about learning these things and learning from other people. And in the martial arts, it's so important for those of us that are black belts and instructors is that we know history so that we can convey that to our students. Otherwise, if we don't, we're giving them false information and a false sense of security that could cost them their lives. This isn't, soccer. Most people aren't going to die because they can't play soccer well. But if you teach somebody self-defense and it's inaccurate or it's ineffective or it's impractical, and then they go out to actually try to use it and they get themselves killed, that's on us as the instructor. That's not on necessarily on the student per se. So you need to know your history. You need to know what people have used in the past, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and be able to modify it. And I know oftentimes from a traditional perspective, because I come from a traditional background, that oftentimes it's really hard for a traditional martial artist to change and incorporate new information into their curriculum or into their teaching style, into their practice style, because you don't want to dishonor those that came before you, and it's kind of looked at with a suspicious eye, and there's all these just honorific type things and the pageantry that goes along with it that are kind of make it difficult for some people to incorporate those things. And then you've got confines of the organization that you're with, that you can't teach certain things and you can only teach them at certain times. I get all that, and that's how I end up where I'm at today with my own system. I understand all of that, so I understand why it's tough, difficult for a lot of people. But if we look at it from a perspective that it's our responsibility to give our students the most accurate, the most relevant, and information that we can, as new information is imparted to us, then we're obligated to do that. And we're doing them a huge service when we do, and a disservice when we don't.
Yeah, I mean, I always tell my students, like, why the reason why you're in school. You learn all these subjects, but all those subjects that you learn in school can apply to everything that you do. Like if you're getting a job, one of those subjects can apply to the job that you're going for. So definitely with
Yeah.
martial arts, yeah, there's kind of a science behind it. There's history behind it, and somewhat there's language and somewhat a math behind that. So yeah,
At least there
people,
should be, right?
yeah,
Otherwise you're just, I've said this a million times. If you don't have all that stuff that you just alluded to, you're just a technician. You're just a parrot. You're just, mimicking what somebody else is doing.
Yeah.
There, a while back, there was this little video that was floating around on social media, and it had this chimpanzee in a karate uniform, and he's jumping and doing a jump spin kick on this kick pad. It kind of looks like a jumping spinning crescent kick or something like that.
Yep.
I said, okay, yeah, so any monkey can do it, but does the monkey really understand what it is that he's doing? Does he really understand the application of what it is, or is he just kind of mimicking what's been taught to him? Well, yeah, it's an effective kick, but can he break it down, and can he teach that to somebody else? Can he distinguish on when it is that that's appropriate and not appropriate to be using that technique? Frankly, if you can be using a jump spinning crescent kick in a street fight, it's probably not self-defense. It's probably a street fight, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like Charlie the Chimp. Yeah, the late Charlie the
Yeah,
Chimp.
maybe
Yeah,
so. Yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah,
guess maybe that's what it was. That sounds familiar. Yeah.
yeah. I know because I'm definitely good friends with Carmen Presti. So yeah, definitely
Okay.
yeah, he's a good man. I mean, really, I never
Yeah.
got to meet Charlie the Chimp. I wish I could, but
Yeah.
the fact that the late Charlie the Chimp was definitely that's the chimp people talking about doing karate. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
I think you're right with that.
yeah. All right, so let's see what I can now. So, all right, so going into like competition, yeah, you said you did like it's like competition on the side with jujitsu. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. So the format that we compete on, well, first of all, for many years, we didn't compete, um, because it was mostly what was around was point karate, point sparring, and then there was continuous sparring, but there was, and then obviously there was grappling, but there was nothing that was integrated short of MMA bouts. But prior to 1993, there wasn't even that, and so it was either stand up that was point, or boxing, or kickboxing, or just grappling, but nothing was integrated together. And a lot of people, when MMA started, with UFC and all that type of stuff, most people don't want to fight full contact in the ring like that, because most people have to work, the next day.
Yeah.
So sport jujitsu is a rule set. It's not a style. It's a rule set that allows anybody from any style to compete against somebody else from another style, where you've got stand-up striking, you've got throws, you've got grappling, all integrated together. So the rule set is set so that you could fight. If you're just a pure stand-up striker and you don't have a ground game, you could fight somebody who's a pure grappler that doesn't have a stand-up game. So if you're strong enough with your stand-up striking, then you should be able to use that. If you're a grappler and you don't have a stand-up striking game, then you should be able to use that. And so the it's kind of like the continuous stuff. I don't know if you've ever seen sport jujitsu before, but essentially it's like MMA with a gi on. And so to me, it's more technical. It's faster paced. There's only depending on the division and the age, there's only 20 to 30 seconds on the ground at a time. So you have to get a submission within the 20 to 30 seconds, or you're back up on your feet. And so, and you start again. And that doesn't mean you can't go back down again if somebody tries to take you back down. But if you don't have a strong ground game, then don't allow the person to take you down. Use your kicks, use your punches, use your range, use your footwork to cut the angles. And if you're a grappler that doesn't have a good striking game, then you better know how to defend your head and keep your hands up and protect your face, right? And so the majority of the competitions that we compete in are sanctioned by the American Sport Jiu-Jitsu League. And so we've been competing in sport jiu-jitsu, gosh, I don't know how many years now, but ultimately we've sent folks to the World Championships and have had competitors on the U.S. national teams that have competed at World Championships. And I think we've probably got 10, I think, world champions in black belt and under black belt divisions. So I think it's a really fun way of competing. It's not the stop and go. I just think that for me personally, because we are more of a reality-based system, I just know that I learned long ago when I actually had to use my martial arts for self-defense, that the stop and go after you get the point develops bad habits. And I know that a lot of folks have kind of started going towards the continuous sparring aspect. And we've actually incorporated a continuous stand-up sparring division within the American Sport Jiu-Jitsu League, but it's by points. You use a clicker. So there's 3 judges and a center ref, and using clickers to award the points. And then you tally the points at the end of each round, rather than like a 10-point must system where it's very arbitrary and very subjective. Because I know a lot of times with the continuous sparring, at least some of the tournaments that I've competed in the past, it just is who's the most aggressive. It doesn't matter whether the techniques land or whether they're effective techniques. I can just brawl for 2 minutes, and if I brawl more than the other person, it's not going to work. In sport jiu-jitsu, in the American Sport Jiu-Jitsu League, they have to be effective techniques. They have to land. If you're just throwing this flurry, you get 1 point for the flurry, for the initial punch, not for 10 ineffective punches. And so different points for a head kick, a different point for a body kick, and for punches, different levels of points for throws, depending on how dynamic the throw is, and points for ground stuff and submissions. So it's much more fun. I like it more, and keeps our students really interested as well. Again, we're really always talking about self-defense, but sometimes you just want to get out on the mat and test it outside of class and see how it's working against other people that you've never trained with before. And plus, you know how it is when you're competing against people around the country, around the world. You just develop these relationships that you just don't get elsewhere, and you can duke it out and punch somebody in the face, and then you hug afterwards, and then you're friends for life,
Yeah, I had it happen many times.
Yeah.
I mean, one of my guests that I had on the show, we was talking about like how he knocked me out, like not temporarily, and then of course I got back up and finished the fight. But no, we kind of laugh about it now, but yeah, it's just yeah. And I remember like going to tournaments like of course Smack Internationals and Kumite Classics. Yeah, those were the tournaments that I really watched. That mostly continuous sparring, and I competed in open kata, and and with weapon. Yeah, that's what.
Yeah. Which Smack International are you talking about? The one, is it? It's up in your neck of the woods, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because I competed in that years ago. Oh my gosh, when I first moved back to New York. So I'm thinking it was like, oh gosh, I don't know how many years ago, because they've been doing that for a long time, right?
Yeah, I mean the last one I went to was 2019. And that was like before I did my pre-test for the 4th degree. I can remember perfectly. So that was the last Smack International that I went to. Then after that, the pandemic dropped, and from there, I think that's I don't know if they do it anymore, but that was like
Because I'm thinking like 20 some years ago. Is that they've been around that long? They've been doing it that long?
I'm not sure, Mike. I mean, I started
Is it
competing.
SMAC? Is that the one?
Yeah,
Smack?
yeah,
Is that the what it is?
yep.
Yeah, I'm thinking that's the one. Maybe it's a different one, but I'm kind of thinking that's the one. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. All right. So before we kind of get to our hidden dojo of segment, here's the last question. What
Okay.
inspirational quote do you describes your journey?
Oh, inspirational quote. Oh my goodness. There's just so many that's out there. I guess it depends on um yeah, this isn't probably an inspirational quote, but it just comes to mind. I don't know why, so I'll just throw it out there. Somebody told me one time, when somebody's giving you advice, um, eat the meat and spit out the bones. So that's not inspirational, but it just kind of comes to mind for me. And I think the point is use what works for you and don't be bound inside of a box that a lot of people place you in. So you just kind of have to work what works for you and what doesn't. And just because something's meat for somebody doesn't mean it's necessarily meat for you. But I'm just the kind of guy that's always an outside the box kind of person anyway. And so I'm always looking at a different way of approaching things and making it so that it works for me or works for those that I'm trying to teach and inspire. So that's probably not the type of inspirational quote you're thinking, though, I suspect,
Hey, yeah, but
but
definitely what.
inspires me oftentimes. How's that?
Yeah. So of course, when we get in our hidden dojo segment, then of course there's
Oh,
the
hidden
fun
dojo.
question.
Now I'm scared.
Yeah. Well, Lisa, this is the fun part of the interview. So yeah, I'm gonna
Okay.
ask you 7 questions, and then of course you answer them
Okay.
at the best of your ability. All
Okay.
right, ladies and gentlemen, we are at the hidden dojo of our segment. So here we
Dun
go.
dun dun.
All right. So the first question would be the best advice you ever gotten and who said it. So I know you
Ah,
mentioned that inspirational quotes say eat the meat and spit out the bones.
Not the
So
bones. Yeah. Okay.
yes.
So, all right. So what's the question? What's the best advice? I guess because I've thought about eat the meat, spot the bones. I guess this one would be it kind of goes along with that. Don't sweat the small stuff. I don't know who said it. I know who told it to me, but he was quoting somebody else. I think it was a book that was out at the time. And just because of my former life being in medicine and doing orthopedics and on call every third night and every third weekend, and you're trying to be a good husband, a good father, a good instructor, a good everything with so many things on my plate at the time. I used to kid and say I feel like I've got this circus music playing in my head all the time, and I'm juggling. And what ball am I going to drop next? The whole dun 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 type thing. And he said, what? Just quit putting so much pressure on you. Just don't sweat the small stuff. He said, you know what? You know what's big stuff? Big stuff is relationships. That's big stuff. The birth of your child, that's big stuff. Death of your parents, that's big stuff. Everything else, that's small stuff. When you look at it in the grand scheme of what's big stuff, you realize, okay, yeah, I don't need to sweat about that. I can put that on the shelf for tonight and let that rest. And I don't need to chew on that all night long and lose sleep. I'm just not going to sweat the small stuff anymore. So that's
Yeah.
kind of, again, nothing that's, probably earth shattering for a lot of people, but for me at the time, it worked.
Okay, the next one. Usually people don't get this one. The worst advice you've ever gotten.
Oh my gosh, the worst advice. Most people don't get it. So are you challenging me? Is that the deal? So since
Well,
most people don't.
most people don't get this one. It's like they either don't get the worst advice or they can't think of the worst
Oh,
advice they got.
okay, so this has evolved over time for me. I can think of a situation where it seemed like it was bad advice at the time, but now I'm kind of glad that I took it. So years ago, I didn't go in the Army until I was out of high school for several years. And part of it was because I wanted to continue to train in martial arts. And I ran into an old teacher, or a former teacher, I guess I should say. And like I said, I'd been out of high school for several years. I was teaching martial arts. I was a department manager at a grocery store, like most of us did at the time. You're working a full-time job and you're teaching part-time. And he said, well, what are you doing? What do you want to do with your life? And he was also a former Boy Scout leader at the time. And I said, well, I think I want to do martial arts full time. I have a full-time martial arts school. He said, what? You want to do that? You can't make any money doing that. You're going to starve. And it derailed me. It derailed my mindset. And within probably 4 months, I joined the Army. And so for years, I thought, gosh, had I not taken his advice and just was opened my school and just taught full time, where would I be now with my martial arts school and my martial arts training and schools and students and all that type of stuff? But my wife had told me probably 10 years ago, because it's been 14 years since I closed my practice and teaching full time, because I had a part-time school and I was teaching. I had my practice, and so I'd be seeing patients during the day and maybe go to a private lesson, go back and see patients, go back and teach at night. And I just couldn't do that because the school grew so much that I couldn't do two full-time gigs, and I was an empty nester at the time. And I thought, you know what, if I'm going to pull the trigger on teaching full-time, I've got to close the practice and go full bore and really follow the passion that I want to do all these years. And I did it, and I'm glad that I did it. And it's been such a great, rewarding life change. And so there was a period of time where I was kind of resentful of my, I guess, derailment of doing medicine. Again, even though I was training and teaching during that time, I was kind of resentful of it. And my wife said, but look at the experience that you're giving your students that most instructors can't give their students, like the anatomy. And now with this book, yeah, I guess it paid off. But the bad advice at the time was this guy that told me, essentially he's telling me, don't follow your passion. Don't teach full time. And because he played it safe, so I guess he thought that I should play it safe as well. So that was bad advice for me at the time. But it ultimately helped. But here I am back doing what he told me not to do anyway. Mm-hmm. So did I meet the challenge as far as nobody else answering that? Yeah. But it worked for me, so I guess that was one of those things where you take lemons and make lemonade, I guess.
Yeah, I guess with passion, well, it says don't follow your passion. It's basically saying, I mean, following your passion is not a real job, but
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people feel that way, and that's okay. He didn't come around and say don't follow your passion, obviously, but in hindsight, that's what he's telling me, because I'm telling him how passionate I'm about it, how I see lives change and how it changed my life, and so I want to be able to help other people with that same thing that helped me. But when you tell somebody, don't follow that dream, you're trying to tell them don't follow your passion. And I think that a lot of people, I guess they think if you love it so much or you like doing it, then you probably shouldn't be doing it for a job. I don't know. It's just kind of weird sometimes, where people feel that you have to suffer, and it's prevalent in the martial art community too. I think a lot of people, they feel like if I'm doing it full time, then I've got to water something down, or I have to be a McDojo or something like that. And you don't have to. You don't have to give up your virtues and your integrity just because you're teaching full time. Be passionate about it and continue to make people toe the line. Yeah, kind of got off on a tangent there. Sorry about that.
Oh no, but really, your passion, like you want to help people grow. It's like, the problems happen out with the killings and all the shootings. Like you want your students. I mean, you can't be a vigilante like Batman or anything, but you just gotta be that person that says, hey, this is a better way you can do your life. You don't have to go out there and be out in the streets. I mean, you want to be in a good place.
But this is probably going to be off topic a bit, but you just reminded me, in martial arts, when you're talking about the shootings and that type of stuff, we are like in a really miserable place societally right now,
Yeah.
And how many places besides dojo do we get to have people of different ethnicities, different backgrounds, different social economic classes, different religions, all on the mat at the same time training, and nobody cares? You sweat on each other, you bleed on each other, and you realize this is this real person. I better get rid of the baggage that I've got, that I've perceived about that person, and realize that we're brothers, man, and we've got, more similarities than we do differences. And the differences, I thrive in those differences, the cultural differences and things like that. It'd be a pretty boring existence if everybody was like me. Believe me, I'm a boring guy. But, so, when we talk about the cultural, the stresses and the shootings, especially, Niagara Falls, and you guys are going through some rough times up there.
Yeah, no, really, it's like for me, it's like I don't want to be out late, so really, I just
Yeah,
want to be home safe. I mean,
right,
this is why I usually tell my students, like, you shouldn't be thinking about what you're going to do when you get home. You should be thinking about if I'm going to make it home. So
right.
yeah,
Yeah. And that's a bad place to be. That really
yeah,
stinks. And, especially anybody of color having to think, oh my gosh, hopefully I don't get pulled over.
yeah.
It's just tough.
Well, there's always Canada.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Not too far for you. You could
Yeah,
probably low crawl that far.
yeah. My brother currently lives over there in Mount Hope. I mean, his wife and his
Okay.
kids. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I can't believe my niece is going to be 15 next month.
Is that
Ooh,
right?
yeah. Ooh.
Good for you.
Yeah, I haven't seen her
Good
in
for
two
her.
years. Yeah, I haven't seen her in 2 years. I mean,
Oh,
but
is that
yeah,
right? Oh, yeah. Because of COVID, you can't go back and forth, right?
yeah. Well, I could go over there now. So really, so once her 15th birthday come, I'm gonna at least see her. So
Oh,
yeah.
good for you. Good for you.
Hey, all right. Here's the next question. Guilty pleasure. How do you reward yourself?
Guilty pleasure. Hanging out with friends. I'm really fortunate that my wife is a martial artist as well. And a lot of our friends are martial artists. And it's just hanging out. But when we hang out, it doesn't always have to be martial arts related stuff, but just having that relationship where I know that people have your back, you've got their back, building relationships with people. So that's it for me, I guess. It's a guilty pleasure.
Yeah, most people say their guilty pleasures like they the pizza, the chicken wings, all of that.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's but that's a good guilty pleasure. Like really you
yeah,
reward yourself by hanging out with your friends. All the work is done. So why just relax and really
yeah.
kind of talk with friends and talk about life. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess probably the other reward would be, is not putting something on my calendar. I kid all the time that I live and die by my Google Calendar. And if it's not on my calendar, because I just have so many, like I said, so many balls in the air all the time, is that, especially lately now, this book has gone to press and it's available. I'm not working till 3 o'clock in the morning trying to get things done. Um, but if I can clear a day on my calendar, jump on the motorcycle, go for a ride, that's a good day.
Hey. All right. Next question. What famous movie would you want to be in?
Oh my gosh. Um, I'm probably dating myself. Well, I'm sure I've already dated myself numerous times here. I don't know if you would remember this one. I think it was A Force of One, a Chuck Norris flick with Bill Wallace. Are you even familiar with it? I think it was like 1978, 1979 or something
Well,
like
if
that.
I'm not, I always can see it on YouTube
Yeah, check it
or
out. I think it was A Force of One. It's the one where Bill Wallace and Chuck Norris was in it, and it's kind of this kickboxing thing. And so I really liked it because it was a kickboxing thing, and plus Bill Wallace was, I was really just a great fan of his back in the day. And back then on regular network television, there was Wide World of Sports, and they'd have kickboxing, on Saturdays and Sundays where you could watch kickboxing on, PKA kickboxing, different rule sets. And so Bill Wallace was one of the guys I like to watch. And then so he was in Force of One, and he played the bad guy. I don't know if you ever met Bill Wallace.
oh,
And
I heard a
well,
lot of them. I heard a lot
okay,
about
so
them. Yeah,
Superfoot, right? And
yeah.
actually, his book was one of the first martial arts books I ever bought. That was a long, long time ago. And so I think it was like a dynamic kicking or something like that. And so I just really liked him. And plus I liked kickboxing, and I did kickboxing as well. And so it was like about this kickboxing ring or kickboxing circuit. And Bill Walsh was a bad guy, got involved in drugs, and obviously Chuck Norris ended up kicking his butt in the end. But yeah, so yeah, again, I'm dating myself. It was probably, and it wasn't one of his better movies either, I don't think. But hey, back then you're seeing guys kicking each other in a ring. Then I was kind of inspired by that.
Yeah, that was amazing. That was amazing. Like I said, I gotta go watch that movie. I mean, it's probably on YouTube somewhere. So
Yeah,
yeah,
I'm sure it is. Yeah, check it out.
yeah, yeah. All right. Secret talent.
Secret talent. I don't know. I got a secret talent. I can juggle in my head. That's about it. Uh, um, I was trying to start to learn to play harmonica. How's that?
Yeah.
That's actually on my bucket list. So um, yeah, I just actually be able to play harmonica. I get this kind of this sensation that you've got to be able to be calmed down, and you've got to be able to have some sense of peace, I guess, to play harmonica. Unless I guess unless you're playing the blues or something. But I kind of envision this, sitting on a log out in the woods playing a harmonica. It just kind of brings some peace to me, I guess. So I've played with that for a little bit, a few years back, and that's still actually on my bookshelf next to me here. I've got some harmonica books and 3 different harmonicas that hopefully I can master at some point.
Yeah, imagine that they made a new movie of Deliverance. Instead of dueling banjos, it'd be dueling
Dueling harmonicas. There you go. Yeah,
Oh,
I don't
man.
want to be in that one though.
Uh, all right, dream celebrity encounter.
Dream celebrity encounter. I think I'm weird in this aspect. I'm not really enamored with celebrity, that I would dream about. I like meeting people, but celebrity doesn't mean a lot to me. I like down to earth people that are just normal Joes like you and I.
Yep.
That's just the way that I am. I've met a lot of celebrities, but none of them are dream encounters. I just want people that are real and can have a real relationship with. So that's probably not what you normally hear, but yeah.
Oh, for me, I'm just a nerd. I mean, I like definitely meeting famous people. I mean,
Yeah,
I know I don't see them like people that make $1 million. I see them like a normal person. Like that's
yeah,
how.
yeah.
Yeah.
There you go.
So when I like actually meet celebrities, I mean, I'm just talking to them like normals. Like,
Yeah,
how you doing? Yeah.
there you go. Yeah, and if you can do that, they probably appreciate that most often.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, usually I'm good with celebrities. Like pretty much with Walker Texas Rangers, I probably let probably any celebrity that was on that show. I
is that
make
right?
an account.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, so I met Chuck Norris and Bill Wallace years and years ago, back when I think it was Good Guys Wear Black came out again. I think that was probably 1978 or something like that. And so they were kind of doing the circuit at the time, and they were going to um, uh, karate tournaments at the time. Kind of doing promos for the movie, and or was that? No, that must have been a Force of One. And so anyway, so I met. Everybody was more intrigued with meeting Chuck Norris, and I was wanting to meet Bill Wallace. So because to me, Bill Wallace was the real deal. Not that Chuck Norris was not. It's just that I liked kickboxing, and Bill Wallace was a kickboxer. So, and then fortunately been able to train with him a few times since then. So that makes it fun too.
Yeah. Definitely Chuck Norris is a down to earth person, really.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
yeah,
that makes it
him,
nice when they're like that.
yeah, him
Yeah,
and his brother, definitely Aaron
yeah.
Norris. Yeah,
Aaron, right? Yeah,
yeah,
Aaron's been in some of his flicks too.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right, here's the final question. 10 years from now.
Oh my gosh, 10 years from now. Hopefully I'm still here in 10 years. I guess that would probably be a good thing. Well, there's still some things I want to do within martial arts. I'm actually working on a research project that is it's an armbar research project. And so what we did, started it 2019, got put on hold because of COVID, because we have to actually be doing arm bars on people, and you couldn't do the contact for a couple of years. And so what we're doing is evaluating the most efficient and effective way of executing a straight arm bar. And it's oftentimes taught one way. But again, it comes down to understanding anatomy. And so what we're doing is we evaluated, did arm bars on 100 people, and it was 30 arm bars on each of those people. And so had 100 arms we did arm bars on, and we measured the kilograms of force. So we use what's called a dynamometer to measure the kilograms of force on their arm, with the force vector going in different directions and the hand position in different directions. So the forearm in different directions, measuring the most effective and efficient way to do it, where the pain was that they felt when they tapped. And so I'm trying to get that completed, and so that we're actually applying science to what it is that we're teaching in martial arts. And also hopefully that I'm going to try to get it published in medical, orthopedic, sports medicine journals, as well as martial arts magazines. And so I hope to get that off my plate. 10 years, I'm hoping that I can sit back and coast a little bit and watch my students continue to grow, my black belts continue to open their schools, and travel the country, teaching seminars and checking on schools, doing the same thing I'm doing, I guess is the point. 10 years from now, hopefully I'm doing the same thing, because I feel really fortunate that I've been able to make a real solid career change this late in my life, which was relatively late when I jumped ship from medicine to teaching full time, that I'm able to do this and make a living doing it, and touch so many people's lives. I feel really fortunate that I'm able to do this, because a lot of people, as you know, wish that they could teach full time, and they just can't. You just can't do it, especially with COVID and everything else. It's just how many schools do you know that closed down because of that, never to open again? It was just really, it was really devastating. So I love what I'm doing so much in my life now that hopefully I'm doing the same thing 10 years from now, I guess, long story short.
Yeah. All right. So before we kind of close up, is there any last minute words you'd like to tell our listeners out there?
Oh my, yeah, I guess continue to be a lifelong learner. Be a perpetual student, no matter what your rank is. Don't be afraid to learn something new, and don't be afraid to take that new information and integrate it into what it is that you're doing now. I know that learning is hard as we get older, and some people say you can't teach old dog new tricks, but I think that you can, if that old dog is willing to learn and be open, and not have biases to what they perceive to be new. So just be a lifelong learner, enjoy what you're doing, enjoy life, have fun with what it is that you're doing. And I think oftentimes in martial arts, we take ourselves so serious that it kind of takes the fun out of it sometimes. You know, I kid a lot of times when I'm traveling and teaching seminars, and you get group photos, and it's like I'm only the only guy in the group photos that's laughing or smiling. Everybody else has these real serious looks. I was like, come on, guys, lighten up. You know, we're all friends here. We're not trying to kill each other. We don't need to intimidate people. You know, just because we're martial artists doesn't mean you have to scare somebody. So don't take ourselves so serious. Have fun. Be a lifelong learner. I guess that would probably be the final words.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining me for the Kickpod. So definitely, hopefully everything goes well for you with the future. And
Thank you, TJ.
definitely, I'll have this all published, and then get this on the air.
Great. Sounds good. Thanks, TJ. Thanks for having me. I look forward to being able to hook up with you soon.
All right, let's do this closing of this podcast. For those who just tuned into this episode, please tune into my previous episodes on the bicbpradio.com, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. And I'll see you next time for another episode here at the Kick Pod. This is your host, TJ Williams, bowing you out.